Judas Iscariot, a name synonymous with betrayal. For centuries, his story has been the ultimate cautionary tale, a warning against disloyalty and greed. But what if we've misunderstood him all along? Could there be another side to the man whose kiss led to the crucifixion of Jesus? Was Judas truly a traitor, or was his role in the passion more complex, perhaps even divinely orchestrated? The Gospels paint a vivid picture of Judas as the disciple who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. In Matthew 26:14-16, we see Judas approaching the chief priests, asking what they would pay him to deliver Jesus into their hands. The betrayal culminates in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Judas identifies Jesus with a kiss, a gesture of intimacy twisted into one of treachery. This act would seal Jesus' fate, leading to his arrest, trial, and crucifixion. But even in these accounts, questions linger. Why would one of Jesus' closest followers, a man who had walked with him, witnessed his miracles, and heard his teachings, commit such an act? Was it greed, as tradition suggests, or something deeper? Could Judas have believed that his actions were not betrayal, but obedience to a higher purpose? Some scholars argue that Judas may have seen himself as fulfilling a necessary role in God's plan. In John 13:27, Jesus tells Judas, "What you are about to do, do quickly." Far from resisting, Jesus seems to accept Judas' actions as inevitable, perhaps even essential. Could it be that Judas was acting not out of selfishness, but out of faith? If so, does that make him a villain or a misunderstood instrument of divine will? The Gospel of Judas, a controversial text discovered in the 1970s, offers an even more radical perspective. In this account, Judas is portrayed not as a traitor, but as Jesus' most trusted disciple. According to the text, Jesus confides in Judas, entrusting him with the task of handing him over to the authorities. This version suggests that Judas' actions were not motivated by greed or betrayal, but by loyalty and a willingness to shoulder the burden of an unthinkable task. Of course, the Gospel of Judas is not part of the canonical Bible, and its authenticity and origins are hotly debated. Yet its very existence forces us to reconsider what we think we know about Judas and his role in the story of Jesus. Could it be that history has been too quick to condemn him, reducing a complex figure to a simplistic archetype of betrayal? Even within the canonical Gospels, Judas's story is fraught with ambiguity. In Matthew, Judas is overcome with remorse after Jesus' arrest, returning the 30 pieces of silver and declaring, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." His despair leads him to take his own life, a tragic end that raises more questions than it answers. If Judas truly acted out of greed, why would he be so consumed by guilt? And if he believed he was fulfilling God's will, why the anguish? The figure of Judas forces us to grapple with profound questions about human nature, morality, and divine purpose. Are our actions truly our own, or are we merely players in a larger plan? Can a single moment define a person, or is redemption always possible? And if Judas was part of God's plan, does that absolve him of blame or deepen his tragedy? As we dive deeper into Judas's story, we must confront the uncomfortable possibility that his betrayal may not be as clear-cut as we've been led to believe. Was he a villain, a scapegoat, or a misunderstood hero? And if Judas' role was part of God's design, what does that mean for how we understand betrayal, forgiveness, and the human capacity for both good and evil? What if everything we thought we knew about Judas Iscariot was wrong? What if his betrayal wasn't an act of treachery, but one of devotion? The discovery of the Gospel of Judas in the 1970s sent shockwaves through the theological world, offering a version of Judas's story that flips centuries of belief on its head. Could this controversial text reveal the true nature of Judas's relationship with Jesus and challenge the way we understand betrayal, loyalty, and sacrifice? The Gospel of Judas is a Gnostic text written in the 2nd century AD, long after the events it describes. Yet its narrative is strikingly different from the accounts in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In this version, Judas is not a villain, but the most enlightened of Jesus' disciples. Jesus reveals to Judas secret teachings, entrusting him with knowledge too profound for the other disciples to understand. And then comes the most shocking twist. Jesus asks Judas to hand him over to the authorities. According to the Gospel of Judas, this act of betrayal wasn't motivated by greed or selfishness. Instead, it was a fulfillment of divine will, a necessary step in Jesus' journey toward crucifixion and resurrection. Judas, in this interpretation, is not a traitor, but the only disciple with the courage to do what needed to be done, even at the cost of his reputation and his soul. But why would Jesus ask such a thing? The text suggests that Jesus saw his crucifixion as essential to his mission. For his divine purpose to be fulfilled, someone had to take the role of betrayer. Judas was chosen not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to carry the weight of the world's condemnation. This perspective radically alters how we see Judas. If his actions were part of God's plan, was he truly guilty of betrayal? Or was he a scapegoat vilified by history for playing the role he was given? The Gospel of Judas challenges the black and white morality often associated with his story, suggesting instead a complex web of duty, sacrifice, and divine purpose. Of course, the Gospel of Judas is not without controversy. It was condemned as heretical by early church leaders and excluded from the canonical Bible. Its origins and authenticity remain subjects of debate among scholars. Yet even if it is not a literal account, its existence forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Could Judas's betrayal have been an act of obedience rather than treachery? And if so, how does that reshape our understanding of loyalty and sacrifice? Even within the canonical Gospels, there are hints that Judas's role may not be as straightforward as it seems. In John 13:27, Jesus tells Judas, "What you are about to do quickly." There is no rebuke, no attempt to stop him, only acceptance. In Matthew 26:24, Jesus declares, "The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed." Was Judas' fate, sealed from the start, part of a divine script he could not escape? And then there's the question of Judas's remorse. In Matthew 27, after Jesus is arrested, Judas returns the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests, declaring, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." Overcome with guilt, he takes his own life. If Judas truly believed he was fulfilling God's will, why would he be so consumed by regret? Was he torn between the weight of his actions and the knowledge that he had played a role in something greater than himself? The story of Judas, when viewed through the lens of the Gospel of Judas, transforms from a tale of betrayal into one of unimaginable complexity. It raises profound questions about free will, divine purpose, and the cost of obedience. Was Judas a traitor, or was he a tragic hero, a man who sacrificed everything to fulfill a destiny he could not refuse? And if Judas's actions were necessary for salvation, does that make him an accomplice to evil or a participant in redemption? Could Judas's betrayal have been part of a divine plan orchestrated long before it unfolded? The story of Judas forces us to wrestle with profound questions about free will, responsibility, and destiny. Was he truly a willing traitor, or was he fulfilling a role written in the fabric of divine purpose, a role he could not escape? In Matthew 26:24, Jesus states, "The Son of Man will go as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." This paradoxical statement suggests that Judas's betrayal was both foreseen and condemned. John's Gospel adds an unsettling layer. Then Satan entered Judas, John 13:27. This raises a troubling question. Was Judas acting of his own free will, or was he overtaken by a force beyond his control? If Satan influenced him, does that absolve Judas of responsibility, or does it reveal his vulnerability to temptation? The tension between choice and predestination lies at the heart of his story, forcing us to confront complex truths about human nature and divine sovereignty. Some scholars propose that Judas served as a scapegoat, akin to the sacrificial rituals of Leviticus, where a goat symbolically bore the sins of the people and was cast out. In this view, Judas's role was to bear the burden of betrayal, enabling Jesus to fulfill his mission of redemption. If true, his story takes on a tragic dimension, less a villain, more a man condemned to be hated for playing a part no one else could. Judas' remorse further complicates his legacy. After Jesus' arrest, he returns the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests, exclaiming, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." Matthew 27:4. His anguish leads him to take his own life, a haunting end that raises the question of whether Judas believed he was beyond forgiveness. If he had sought mercy, could he have been redeemed? Theologians remain divided on Judas's ultimate fate. Dante's Inferno places him in the lowest circle of hell, eternally consumed by Satan. Yet others suggest that Judas's role was so integral to God's plan that condemning him would seem unjust. If Judas was chosen for this task, could he also have been forgiven? Jesus' teachings on forgiveness and redemption challenge us to consider whether even the gravest sins might find grace. The tension between free will and destiny in Judas' story resonates beyond theology. How often do we find ourselves acting in ways we later regret, shaped by forces we don't fully understand? Are our choices truly our own, or are they influenced by circumstances, pressures, or purposes we can't see? Judas's actions serve as a mirror, reflecting humanity's ongoing struggle with agency, accountability, and the roles we play in larger narratives. The Gospel of Judas adds another layer to the enigma. In this account, Judas is depicted as Jesus' most trusted disciple, chosen to carry out a mission of great significance. Here, Judas acts not out of greed or malice, but out of obedience to Jesus' request, knowing it will lead to condemnation. If this perspective holds any truth, Judas becomes a figure of profound sacrifice, willingly embracing infamy to fulfill a divine plan. Even within the canonical Gospels, Judas's role defies simple categorization. Was he a villain who succumbed to greed, or a tragic hero who bore the unbearable weight of betrayal for the sake of salvation? His story challenges our need for clear heroes and villains, reminding us that life is rarely black and white. Without Judas, there would be no betrayal, no crucifixion, and no resurrection. Judas' tale invites us to reflect on forgiveness, grace, and the nature of human choice. If his actions were part of a divine plan, how do we reconcile his betrayal with the concept of free will? And if even Judas might find redemption, what does that mean for how we view our own failures and those of others? Judas Iscariot's story concludes in tragedy, his name etched in history as the ultimate betrayer. Yet as we've uncovered, his role in the crucifixion of Jesus is far more intricate than a mere act of treachery. Was Judas condemned from the start, or did he possess the potential for redemption? His story forces us to grapple with profound questions about grace, forgiveness, and the complexity of human choice. In Matthew 27:5, after returning the 30 pieces of silver, Judas declares, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." Overwhelmed with remorse, he takes his own life. This haunting image of despair raises a crucial question. Did Judas believe he was beyond forgiveness? And if Jesus' message is one of grace and redemption, could that mercy have extended even to the man who handed him over to be crucified? Theologians remain divided. Dante's Inferno famously places Judas in the lowest circle of hell, eternally devoured by Satan, while others suggest that his betrayal, though catastrophic, was essential to God's plan. If Judas was destined to fulfill this role, does that absolve him of blame, or does it make his fate even more tragic? Was Judas a sinner beyond redemption, or a man carrying out a divine mandate? The Gospel of Judas, a controversial and non-canonical text, paints a radically different picture. In this account, Judas is Jesus' most trusted disciple, entrusted with the difficult task of delivering him to the authorities. Here, Judas's actions are not betrayal but obedience, a willingness to bear the burden of infamy to fulfill a divine purpose. If this interpretation holds even a fragment of truth, it transforms Judas from a villain into a figure of profound sacrifice. Even within the canonical Gospels, Judas' role is enigmatic. In John 6:70, Jesus says, "Have I not chosen you the 12? Yet one of you is a devil." This statement implies that Judas's betrayal was foreseen and perhaps inevitable. If Jesus knew Judas's fate, does that make Judas a victim of divine predestination? Or does it emphasize the tension between free will and God's overarching plan? Judas's despair highlights a universal human struggle, the fear that our failures are irredeemable. How often do we, like Judas, carry the weight of guilt, convinced we are beyond forgiveness? Yet Jesus' teachings repeatedly emphasize mercy. He forgives Peter for denying him 3 times and prays for the soldiers who crucify him, saying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23:34. Could the same forgiveness have been available to Judas had he sought it? Judas's story also forces us to consider the nature of redemption. If his betrayal was necessary for the crucifixion and resurrection, does that make him a participant in salvation rather than a traitor? Without Judas, the events leading to humanity's redemption might never have unfolded. His actions, however painful and controversial, were a catalyst for the greatest act of love in history. Even beyond its theological implications, Judas's story resonates with timeless human themes. His tale is one of loyalty tested, choices made under pressure, and the crushing weight of regret. Judas reminds us that human actions are rarely black and white. He challenges us to reconsider how we judge others, particularly when we lack the full context of their choices. As we reflect on Judas, his story invites us to ask uncomfortable but necessary questions. Is anyone ever truly beyond redemption? How do we reconcile human frailty with divine grace? And if even Judas might find forgiveness, what does that mean for the rest of us? In the end, Judas' legacy is one of both tragedy and complexity. He forces us to confront the dualities of faith and betrayal, free will and destiny, guilt and grace. His life and death challenge us to look beyond labels and consider the deeper truths about forgiveness and the human capacity for redemption.